Welcome to the Executive Lounge. My name is Nhyira Addo, and as always, we bring you insights from people who have walked the talk and have proven that it's doable. Today, we're joined by Mawuena Trebarh. She is the first female CEO of the Ghana Investment Promotions Center. Welcome to Executive Lounge.
Thank you, Nhyira.
So, is this the life you envisaged when you were about 7?
Not at all. I don't think so, no. I recall having expressed a desire to be a doctor. Mm-hmm. I was very interested in supporting people feel better. So my late mother told me that I used to take dolls and practice giving injections and use the stethoscope to check their hearts and so on. So I'd always had the idea that I would be involved in a career in medicine at some point. So this is entirely divine providence.
I see. Well, probably medicine in another way.
I think so.
You nurse investment dreams and opportunities.
That's a nice way to put it.
Yeah. You've done quite well for yourself. And would you say being homeschooled play a part in all of this? Did it prepare you? What advantage did that give you, if any?
Well, first I would say that if I've been able to achieve anything, it's entirely by God's grace. But I also will absolutely concede that the influence of my parents right through my formative years and even as a young adult, considering various career options as well as my own personal life, they have been a very powerful influence in guiding and directing the choices that I have made personally and professionally. I really think with tremendous humility about the fact that I could have been born into any other family, to any set of parents, but God in His own wisdom brought me to Professor Ernest Dumont and the late Cecilia Dumont. And the diligence and the attention with which they looked at parenting is something that never fails to amaze me. Becoming a parent myself and realizing that it's a tough job, the sacrifices that they've made, and obviously all of that culminating in what I'm able to do in service to the nation, because they set the first example. And I always like to emphasize that I really give my father a tremendous level of credit, because he was the first man in my life. And his ability to reinforce positive messages to me as a young African female, that it's not about your gender, you're just as smart as the boys. Focus on what God-given talents you have. Work on your weaknesses, don't run away from them. Those kinds of poignant messages sometimes resonate whenever I'm faced with a difficult situation or challenge. So they definitely, of course, God above all others, but they definitely played a very powerful role in where I am today. I'm very grateful.
Your career can be described as a sterling career. You've not only worked in investment promotion, but you've done, strategic management, communications in the mines. You've also worked for a multinational telecoms giant. A variety of experiences and exposures. How have you balanced that with the relationship you have with your daughter?
First and foremost, I think it's important that I acknowledge the structures that support me and allow me to do what I do. And I'd have to mention my husband, retired Flight Lieutenant Trebarh. He is a force of nature for me, in the sense that when I feel like there is not enough time, mother-daughter time, he has a way of reassuring me, because he is always present. Because I really believe that women in the workplace will definitely face different challenges from men in the workplace. It's not a function of gender, it's just a reality of who you are and what your role is. And so I think balancing all of those different experiences but also creating opportunities to share that with my daughter, as young as she is. She's 5, but she thinks she's 25. Those positive messages that were given to me by my parents, and with the support and guidance of my husband, reinforcing those messages to her. So she's got very strong opinions about various subjects, and we encourage her to continue to articulate those, but also recognize the fundamentals, which are in humility and service. So I try to create opportunities, and I obviously also carve out time that is specifically for her, so that I can move away from any feelings of guilt, but also recognize that I must be balanced in what I contribute and give of myself in my work, and what I must also equally contribute and give of myself in my personal life.
You know, quite recently there has been a lot of talk about equality, equity in the workplace. You've done quite well in spaces that have been traditionally or hitherto positions that were held by male professionals or executives. Do you find that the concept of affirmative action is relevant, or people should be able to walk into spaces and rise based on merit?
Right. I think I've always been very clear on this particular issue, and I think it's a function of the experiences that I've had the privilege to be a part of in growing professionally. First and foremost, it must always be about you as an individual. If you determine that the issues are going to be around gender, then they will be. And you will highlight the fact that you happen to be female and you happen to have unique challenges. The other option you have is to make a determination that I'm a human being with gifts and talents by God's grace, and I would love the opportunity to apply those to your commercial context. And so you make it more about the quality of what you bring to the table as a human being. And then the gender issues become quite secondary. I'm quick to say that that doesn't necessarily mean that someone else will respond to you in the same way and decide not to look at you based on your gender. So there's a delightful story I would love to share with you about my first, I think it was my first or my second day at the GIPC. I got into the office, and it's a very funny story. I got into the elevator, and I was joined by 2 gentlemen who obviously didn't recognize me, but the appointment had been announced and so on. And they started talking about how there's these small girls who have been appointed as CEOs, and they hear that there's a new small girl who's a CEO. And I was standing behind them and smiling. They got out on the second floor, and they were talking about how they have a meeting with this new CEO and so on and so forth. So as they were leaving, I said, "Oh, have a nice day, gentlemen." And they departed. About an hour later, they came up, and the secretary said, "Oh, Madam, your 11 o'clock is here." So I said, "Oh, I'll come out and receive them myself." And I came out, and as soon as they saw me, their jaws dropped to the ground. God. I love that story because inevitably, when they came in, of course, they were very uncomfortable, and I was trying to reassure them. I don't take these things personally, and I don't think anybody should. When you're dealing with change and pushing an agenda to change the mindset in relation to any one particular issue, I think you need to be a little less sensitive to people's initial viewpoint, because inevitably it is your performance, it's the results that will speak. And I'm very proud to say that subsequently, over the years, in the last 4-year period, those 2 gentlemen have become great advocates for the work of the GIPC, particularly to the Ghanaian business community, which is very important for us. So I don't think that it should be about gender. Sometimes it is, and I think those issues have to be confronted. For instance, how much time should working mothers have? Must they apologize because they're young and they're starting families? Obviously, my response to those two questions would be no. And those issues have to be addressed, I believe, certainly holistically as a nation. We need to look at the contribution of young female executives and ensure that they feel they can participate without being penalized because they're also young and because they have young families and so on. But at the same time, your output has to speak for itself. You cannot excuse mediocrity by saying that you're female and therefore somehow you should be given special consideration.
Very interesting that you mentioned that. And one of the things I've picked up on so far is the move away from thinking too much about your gender and making the point that is not about the gender. Right. We ask our audience to send us their quotes, and there's one that comes to mind is by Mandy Hill, an American blogger turned author now, and she's a strong woman. Don't play victim. They don't make themselves look pitiful, right? And they don't point fingers. They stand and they deal. Right. Think back over the years in your career, at a point in your career where you actually did live this quote.
I guess I would say perhaps in the wonderful learning experiences that I had working as a female underground exploration geologist in Obuasi. At the time there were about 10,000 men on the mine and no women working underground. Wow. The myth was that women bring bad luck on the mines. So they didn't really have a preference to see women working underground. But I think I was, fresh undergraduate, super excited to be back home because my first degree was from the University of Jos in Nigeria. Really keen to just hit the ground running and be a sponge and absorb as much learning as I could. So I was really not at all engaged as far as my gender, of course, until I got to the mines and I discovered that I happened to be the only woman who was going to be working underground. And to my surprise, some of the gentlemen who were issuing, the overalls and the boots declared that they didn't have boots my size. It was just to put me off going, and obviously I was at least a head and a half taller than most of the guys. I'm a tall girl, and so I knew something was up. So when it got to my turn and the guy who was distributing the boots kept on skipping me and going to the next person, finally I said to him, I need somebody to mentor me and support me as I start this journey, and I've noticed that you look like somebody everybody respects. And he immediately said, bring her the boots. Bring her the boots. You deal with the situation as it comes, as it occurs. Of course, people are going to have their perceptions, whether you're male or you're female. Perception is one thing, reality is another thing. You create the reality in the way you choose to interact. And I think over time, I by the grace of God, had the opportunity to build a reputation for wanting to be excellent at my work. Not because I was without faults, but because I wanted to be diligent and make sure that I was accurate, because you're dealing with an industry that's really requires a lot of accuracy. So I think dealing with the situation, dealing with individuals, but making sure that my performance speaks for itself. Those are the things that I think helped me to excel and progress. I'm a girl's girl, but I can hang out with the boys. I mean, I only have brothers, so I'm pretty comfortable in every space. We're all human.
Oh, well, you're watching the Executive Lounge, and our guest today is the CEO of the Ghana Investment Promotion Center. And we will be back after this, and when we do, we'll be finding out the world of investment promotion. What does the future hold for it? Stay tuned. This is the Executive Lounge. Yeah, welcome back. This is the Executive Lounge with me, Nhyira Addo, and today we're learning all about the world of investment promotion and the life of the first female CEO of the Ghana Investment Promotion Center. Mawuena,
Yes.
before we left,
Yes.
you talked a lot about what I would like to call soft power from your mind's experience, from handling the situation of the agitation and the spillage and the aftermath, from the work with MTN and now at the GIPC. How important is that kind of influence in authority compared to what we call the hard, I'm the boss power?
Well, I mean, I think it's important for anyone in a leadership role to really understand their leadership style. What is it that defines you as a leader? And for me, leadership is two things, as I said. It's humility and it's service. Those are not words you would intuitively think of when you look at the definition of leadership, because you're expected to inspire and direct and counsel to achieve certain results. But I do think that having a certain leadership style and owning your leadership style is very important if you're going to be successful in that role, and influence in a positive way. And so having had the privilege of being invited to serve, because that is what I see it as, an opportunity to serve. As you rightly pointed out, I've been a young female executive across a number of different sectors in the private sector. So this was my first public sector job. And I think many a time, because of the anxiety about the unknown that comes with working in the public sector, a lot of young, talented Ghanaian professionals wouldn't immediately consider it. Plus, they would be thinking about what's the quality of the remuneration. But I think I was at a point professionally where I recognize that the opportunity doesn't always come in that form. And rather than sit on the sidelines and complain, I really had the opportunity to participate in a process to improve whatever I would come to meet. And so I think that's the context in which I looked at the leadership opportunity. It really is about service. And I think because the Investment Promotion Center is a service institution, its very mandate requires a service approach to delivering on investment promotion, because you're trying to serve the business community with information, with details that will help them to take an informed decision. You must necessarily come to the table in such a role with a mindset towards service. I think humility becomes even more important because you're dealing with individuals who have access to vast financial resources. You don't want to be compromised because in many respects you also play a regulatory role. And so it's important to recognize the humility that's required to ensure that you stay on the straight and narrow, that you're delivering a value proposition that resonates with your own personal morals. And so because it is service, you try to create opportunities for young professionals within the center. And the Investment Promotion Center we have in Ghana is quite a youthful organization, I'm proud to say. The average age is mid-30s. So we've got some very bright, very talented young professionals who are really serious and committed about what they do. Recognizing that with humility, the choices that we make, the investments that we promote, have the impact that they do 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. That's very humbling to be part of something that's so futuristic to support development. I think those ideals really guided my leadership style. And of course, I think that also permeates into the value systems that other young professionals within the center also present when they're interacting with our stakeholders. So having said that, I'm obviously very particular about the discipline of doing the work. I've always articulated that any leader is only as good as the team that stands beside them. not behind them, beside them, because inevitably you are articulating for the whole organization. So you must have a unified voice in what you put forward.
Before we get into the world of investment promotion, let's dwell a little bit longer on leadership. You know, how your own style has evolved over time, because you transitioned from different sectors, from the mines to telecommunications, all in the private sector. Now you're in the public sector. I'm sure somewhere along the line the expectations you may have had didn't match the reality. How much room did you have to adjust, and what did you have to do?
Well, I mean, I think that's a great question. I think a lot of it also, again, reverts back to the premise that it's a divine opportunity and a privilege to be invited to serve. And as you're growing professionally, there's always an opportunity to learn something new. So if you step into a situation as a young person, assuming that you are the repository of all wisdom because you have access to social media and new technologies that perhaps someone else in the organization who's a bit older doesn't have, then you'll be losing out on the tremendous opportunity to learn about the institutional history. And so I think that when you step into any new career or new work environment, the transition is smooth because you choose to respect, one, institutional history, two, the ideals and the mandate that govern that organization, and three, your own aspirations, which hopefully you have aligned to the organization. Otherwise, you wouldn't have applied to be working there. And I think that having that focus then helps you to ensure that, yes, I've come into this space, I'm learning something new for the first time. I mean, I remember, again, working with Ashanti Goldfields, having transitioned out from working underground and now working in Accra at the Gold House at the time, not knowing the slightest thing about PowerPoint, not having had any idea what to do. There was a wonderful geologist, brilliant man, his name was Daniel Bansa, and he put me to the test. He said, in a week's time, there's going to be a presentation to a group of institutional investors who are coming from the UK. We have been asked as the exploration team to put together a presentation. Mawuena, I want you to work on the slides. And he knew I didn't know anything about PowerPoint. I was extremely young. But I thought it was more important for me to grab the skills, and nobody was going to baby me because I happened to be the only woman on the team. So I disciplined myself to stay overnight in the office and taught myself how to use PowerPoint. And it was tough, but it was a very steep, very fast learning curve. And it's something that I became so comfortable with over time that when I got into the investor relations function at the same company, I was preparing presentations for the group president, the group CEO. Those skills have gone with me everywhere else I've gone. And recognizing that, oh, this is something that I don't know, so why don't I challenge myself to acquire that knowledge? It's been beneficial to me, it's been beneficial to the organizations that I work for subsequently. But I recognize that it was an area that I needed to learn. Even in my current role, I didn't come into the role knowing what it means to be the CEO of the Investment Promotion Center. But I did respect institutional history. And I thought it was important that some of the more senior directors who had been there for a long time support me as I went through that learning curve. And I'm very proud of those learning experiences that I believe have reinforced what we've been able to do as a GIPC.
What I get from this is mindset. The level at which you'll function, be it successfully or otherwise, in a new environment is going to be dependent on the mindset you approach it with.
Right.
But the mindset is often developed from the exposure and the upbringing that you had.
Right.
You spent some time in Nigeria, then, you know, so you had a multicultural exposure.
Right.
So for somebody who may not have that experience and that exposure, how do we cultivate the mindset that keeps us perpetually optimistic and open-minded enough to be able to learn and transition from various different spaces and still be relevant and successful.
Right. I mean, the first thing I'll say is that I always recognize that exposure, those learning opportunities that were created by our parents were entirely a privilege. They were not a right. And because you recognize that it was a privilege, when you are presented with a new career opportunity, you see it as an opportunity to also give back for the sacrifices that were made for you to be exposed to other environments, other cultures, etc., and so on. I think that for those who haven't necessarily had that opportunity, in today's world, there really isn't an excuse. There's every opportunity to experience multicultural environments. Why? Because of the quality of the technology we have, because of the quality of access to information that we now have, our ability to read about other people from other places, and even develop relationships with people using technology. Those things are intentional decisions. So if we take an intentional decision that we will incorporate in some way, shape, or form into the learning experiences of young Ghanaians as they start their education, exposure to other cultures, and teaching them about other languages and the importance of being bilingual and how beneficial that can be. It's something that's got to be strategically done. So we decide as a nation that these are some of the things that we want to do, because we want people who have a broad scope of understanding and tolerance, because they understand other cultures. That's very, very important, and I think it's fundamental to our continued success as a nation. Ghana is one of those places where, fortunately, we haven't had as many challenges as other African countries have had, for instance, with people of different ethnicities and so on. It's really a non-issue. Certainly in my family, for instance, we're from every part of the country, and we're very proud of that pluralism. But I do think that making sure that we're intentional and we incorporate experiences that allow students, young people, to meet someone from somewhere else and interact with someone from somewhere and develop relationships with someone else. A lot of the things that we're often afraid of, we're only afraid because we don't know. And it is when we are armed with information that we begin to understand, oh, this is my classmate. The other day I was taking my daughter to school, and we were passing by a mosque, and she said, "Mommy, you know, I pray in the church, but my classmate Abdul prays in the mosque, but we are all praying." At that young age, those are the kinds of value systems that you want to instill and keep on reinforcing. So there's a lot of benefit in the differences that we all come to the table with, and harnessing those skill sets so that young people are able to interact with someone from some other part of the country or someone from some other part of the world or the continent. Those are things that will only help us to advance our development.
The author Malcolm Gladwell calls this in his book, The Outliers, that it's the process of concerted cultivation.
Right.
How much of that would shift the paradigm for Ghana's own development and preparedness to take global, advantage of global opportunities, say in the next 10, 15 years?
Gosh, I think it's absolutely fundamental. Obviously, being a student of strategy, I love such caveats of information, because it reinforces that notion that we really have to be decisive and intentional about where we're going in respect of development, not just from an investment promotion perspective, but as you rightly said, in terms of our mindset. If we are very determined that we will be successful, whatever the challenges may be, we will continue to look at them and see how we can turn those challenges into opportunities. I'm a very firm believer, being a science student myself, but having a mother who was from the arts and social sciences side, who insisted on literature and the theory of music. those things have enhanced who I am today, and my ability to hold a conversation outside of just financials and balance sheets and tax and incentives is really important, because business is also about relationships and how you endear yourself and present yourself on behalf of the country is fundamentally important. Each and every one of us who come in contact with someone is a potential investment promotion officer. For somebody who's not from our country and comes into the country, they come in contact with the taxi driver. What are the impressions that they will have? They get to their hotel, they interact with hotel staff. What are the impressions that they will form? What experiences will they have? When they're looking to experience social life in Ghana, the experiences that they have, each and every one of us is promoting the country in one way, shape, or form. And therefore, it becomes especially important that we have a population of people, irrespective of their economic circumstances or their social status, who are able to present the quality of the human beings that make up the summation of the Ghanaian. So I think, like all investment promotion officers, I'm very optimistic generally. That's our nature.
Right.
I just think that we have to be very deliberate and determine that these are some of the things that we want to see as outcomes when we are developing and designing and reassessing the academic programs that we put together for students. And I think there are a lot of private sector companies, or I should say academic institutions, that are doing that. So you get a rounded individual, as my late mother would say, somebody who can speak about music but also speak about money.
Okay. The world of investment promotion, just give us a snapshot of what happens in there. When you travel around the world, all we see is your, jet setting. What actually happens when you're out there?
Yeah, it's not as glamorous as people think it is, Nhyira. It's a tremendous amount of time on an aircraft, and that can definitely take a toll on you physically. But it's really about taking very strategic decisions. If you look at Ghana today, and you look at our priority list of sectors in terms of development, you'll see agriculture and agro-processing right at the top of the list. You'll see infrastructure, you'll see power, you'll see oil and gas, of course. But I think what we're doing differently now is to ensure that we are not everywhere. We are placing ourselves strategically in front of decision makers who understand what it means to invest in our space. They understand that it's not the Ghana of 2 decades ago. It's Ghana today, middle income status, progressing to upper middle income status, and ensuring that they understand that we want to see jobs created. We have rules, we have regulations that we expect to have followed. We want to see more joint venture partnerships because we want more Ghanaian influence in business. Those are the things that we promote. Those are the things that we drive in our campaigning, especially with the domestic business community, because they also need a lot of support to match the interest of the international investing community. So striking that balance is actually a tremendous amount of work. There's a research function within the Investment Promotion Center, pulls up a lot of data, puts together investment profiles. We call for investment documentation from the Ghanaian business community that we can showcase. You know very well about our Ghana Club 100, celebrating corporate excellence in the country, driving the Think Ghana, Make It Happen campaign. So we're thinking positively about all of the opportunities to invest, and we must make it happen. We are making it happen. There are tremendous stories of brilliant Ghanaian entrepreneurs who have become very successful even in these times. And I think those are the stories that we need to put forward, because that's the proof. We no longer have to speak so much because the proof is already there in the excellence of the Ghanaian domestic business community.
Interesting. The concept of investment promotion, as you've explained, is one that sort of looks on the outside.
Right.
Reading from, I think it was a Bennett Penter's book on the enterprise map of Ghana, you find that a lot of our businesses are owned by foreigners. And I know when we struck Oyo, it was one of the big, talking points. Will this space change, and when do you think it's likely to change?
Nhyira, it's already changing. It's already changing. I think that's one of the big stories behind our Think Ghana, Make It Happen campaign. Because the reality is that you also need to look at the sector-specific investments. Now, clearly, big infrastructure investments, roads, ports, airport facilities require other resources, other expertise, new technologies that we simply don't have in the country. So, of course, we would invite potential investors to come into the country. Now, having said that, they also need to be the kinds of investors who understand what we expect out of those investments that are being pursued. So we don't just hand over a whole lot of incentives unless we can prove that if we offer those incentives to the company in question, significantly more will accrue back to the country in the number of jobs that are created and the technology that's created. But I think what is exciting for us as an investment promotion center is to see the level of change and interest in registering with the Ghana Investment Promotion Center by the domestic business community, because that was the biggest perception to deal with, that, the Investment Promotion Center is only interested in foreign direct investment. No. We actually need to start with the domestic business community. And I think giving them the attention and the focus that, quite frankly, they deserve and have always deserved, making sure that they are first in the information flow as far as investment opportunities, and making sure that when international players come into the country, the quality of our business-to-business meetings has vastly improved. So the international player also recognizes that, hey, these people know what they're doing. They know what they're looking for. I am invited to participate, and we expect mutual benefit for all parties. So their commercial interests are served. Our development agenda is also served. I think that's the approach, and we're very, very, very excited about the quality of the new experiences that we're having with the Ghanaian business community.
Awesome stuff. We're going to take another break, and when we come back, you'll hear more from Mawuena Trebarh, CEO of the Ghana Investment Promotion Center. This is the Executive Lounge. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is the Executive Lounge with me, Nhyira Addo, and we're talking to the GIPC's first female CEO, Mawuena Trebarh. Before we went away, we talked about the investment promotion business, and you took us through this interesting maze of what you do that you don't call glamorous, but from where I sit, seems glamorous enough. I'd give anything to travel the world, but of course you do some very serious work. In your estimation, from the trends you've observed and everything, where do you think will be the prime areas as far as Ghana and the sub-region is concerned, in terms of where we would need to attract more investment?
Oh my gosh, without a shadow of a doubt, it's definitely agriculture and agro-processing. But I think what we really will be looking to do going forward as an investment promotion center is to look at the entirety of the value chain. I think you know the history of our long-standing production economy, producers of cocoa, producers of gold, producers of other commodities, but the value proposition in processing and packaging has been part of the missing link, and making sure that we're able to pull in those small shareholder farming communities. They constitute more than 60% of our population, and they're all agrarian farmers.
That's
so
right.
We need to make sure that in promoting investments along the entire value chain, those shareholder farming communities are incorporated into our investment promotion initiatives. Leveraging the fact that geographically our positioning, I guess I can speak with authority on this because of my geology background, we're on average 6 hours away from any one continent. And taking advantage of that opportunity to reach other markets from Ghana is another tremendous opportunity. And so looking at agriculture, agro-processing, and then tying that into the whole manufacturing sector as well. That's going to be fundamental. I think the other area of opportunity obviously will be in the tourism sector. It is absolutely astounding the things that we can do with tourism in terms of development and promoting investment. So obviously foundational to that will be making sure that the investments in hospitality facilities are there, so that as the entertainment facilities, as nature conservation, as various other facets of tourism, our own culture and creating the tourism investment opportunities that come with the diversity of culture that we have in this country. Those will certainly be key areas of focus. So agriculture, agro-processing, manufacturing, tourism for sure. And of course I didn't add that looking at agriculture and agro-processing automatically means that you're looking at export trade.
That's right.
And making sure that we're producing more to serve our domestic environment, but also export to create the sort of force. And I think for me, that's where the exciting opportunities are. Seeing the Ghanaian business community rise to the occasion, take ownership, and become global leaders in business. That for me, it would be a fantastic opportunity.
So this is the future image.
Yes.
Let's do the pragmatic, lowest hanging fruit. In which order would you go after it if you had to prioritize on a short leash?
I would definitely say agriculture and agro-processing for sure. Again, if you look at what's happening globally, food security issues, national security issues, various global threats to life and persons due to different ideologies and so on, it's becoming increasingly important that people are able to secure resources for the future. I think it is the circumspection with which we as a country are constantly reviewing our legislation, looking at our regulatory environment, and making sure that we are progressing along a path of development. So we're seeing more jobs coming in for young people. We're being strategic in the kinds of academic programs that are being developed, so young professionals who are coming out of academic experiences fit into those jobs that are being developed 5 years, 10 years over the period as those investments are rolling out. So making sure that the private sector is communicating with academic institutions so that they know this is the kind of skill set we will need in the next 2 years, because this investment would have come full circle by then. These are all different aspects of some of the work that we do, and taking that futuristic view that agriculture and agro-processing will actually be a very glamorous sector for young Ghanaians to look at, invest, and become incredibly successful. I think that's the optimistic future, a country in which there is prosperity for everybody, a country in which the investments that come into the country, some are generated from outside of the country, but quite a majority also come from within. I think those are some of the hopes and aspirations that certainly I have, and I'm sure the team at the GIPC definitely has.
Interesting points, and I couldn't agree with you more. But as we get ready to land, let's get to know this Monday born. What's the Monday child like?
Very strong-willed, deeply loyal, and fiercely committed to whatever will benefit the largest number of people. I think because we start off the working week, there's a level of seriousness that we come to the table with naturally.
That's right.
But I also think that there is tremendous passion for what it is we do, And that hopefully informs the enthusiasm and excitement with which other people we come in contact with, at least those of us born on Monday anyway, are able to share and ensure that there are positive outcomes. I guess if I were to sort of really delve a little bit deeper, I'm very rooted in my faith. And I think it's the beginning and end of everything. It's been my anchor in difficult times. And it's also been my anchor when there have been successes. I've been taught to be mindful of the quality of my celebration and success, because there's almost always another challenge ahead of you. And so if you dwell too much on your successes, then you lose sight of the next challenge that's ahead of you. And that is not to say you shouldn't be proud of or happy with whatever successes you enjoy. But you must be mindful that it also means that there's a higher expectation of you. And that should keep you very, very humble at all times.
Wow, fantastic. What do you do to relax?
I sleep.
Interesting.
I think the unanticipated element of this job was the quantum of travel that's required, and that is why I think we've had to be very strategic as an investment promotion center. Otherwise, you'll be drawn in 1,000 different directions, and you may not really have so much to show for it. So when I get the opportunity to really relax and rest, I really like to give my body a break. I'm very serious about physical fitness, being married to a soldier, so I like to work out. It's a great way to relieve stress. It's pretty rigorous. 5 a.m. every morning, by 6 a.m. we're done, but it leaves you very refreshed for the day. And then, of course, there's nothing better on earth than being around 5-year-olds. Yes, for me, that is my absolute joy.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, I do know you play the piano.
I do.
When was the last time you played?
Oh my gosh, it's probably a couple of years now. I haven't practiced for a very, very long time, but because of the family background that I come from, music has always been a big part of it for generations. So I'm sure it's in the recesses of my mind. If the opportunity presents itself, I'm always being counseled by my dad to get back to practicing on the piano. But I'm hopeful that as things level out, I'll be able to spend some more time on that as well.
Okay, well, as you look forward to spending time playing the piano, well, we will be counting our luck and being grateful for spending time with you on the Executive Lounge.
Thank you, Nhyira. It's been fantastic. I've enjoyed it tremendously. Thank you.
So this has been another edition of the Executive Lounge, and we'll come back with some more in the very near future. My name is Nhyira Addo. Go forward, make rain. Shalom.